What time is it? 10:30. Julie, should we start? Is that?
Yeah,
okay.
that's fine.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome everyone. Council of Governors meeting. I don't think there are introductions, but welcome anyway. Apologies for absence.
Yeah, we've got apologies from Charlie Draper, Julia Prince, Tom O'Kane and Natasha Bartholomew.
Okay, thank you very much. Any declarations of interest at all? No. Minutes of the last formal meeting of governors of the 1st of December. Any corrections? Tom? You're on mute, Tom.
Yeah,
that's it.
Just to say, sorry, we ought to acknowledge that Andrew Horn and I think, is it Jenny Cheng have left as had to resign as governors. I think Andrew Horn had a continuingly more difficult domestic situation with Mavis being unwell. And then I've got one correction on page 11. And the top, page 11, it seems to say that Rajiv Gatha was sad to be a qualified accountant, and whether being a qualified accountant is anything to do with having your accounts qualified, I don't know, but I think he probably means he said he was a qualified accountant.
Sometimes I am, actually.
Well done. Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's move on then to the so no matters arising as far as I can see, unless anyone's got anything. No. In which case, let's welcome Matthew Poll, a clinical psychologist from Talking Therapies. Hello, Matthew. I can see you at the bottom of my screen. Who's going to talk to us about ARRS, and I keep forgetting what it's, additional something, but he'll explain it. Specialist mental health practitioner roles in Berkshire West. So, Matthew, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. Morning, everybody. Just to clarify my role for context, so I'm head of access to psychological therapies inside of BHFT. So yeah, large part of the role is governing the access to talking therapies, the service, but also the specialist assessment teams inside of talking therapies as well, including the team that's known as CPE or the Common Point of Entry team, but the wider group is known as the Gateway, and there's a lot of jargon around. So just to be clear, the Gateway is an amalgamation of those services, and it's the way you get in as a client into services and access treatment as efficiently and as relevantly as possible, depending on the treatment. And I'm here today, as Martin says, to talk about a new set of roles that are coming in, or have already started coming in, which effectively bolt onto the front of that system for the benefit of the GPs and the PCNs and, of course, the clients who they serve. So if that's enough context, I'll start talking through. Whoever's sharing, thank you very much for doing that. Can I get a name of the person who's actually moving the slides along for me? Is it Julie?
It's Linda. It's Linda.
Hi, Linda. Thank you so much, Linda. I'm only asking because I want to be polite and I want to skip a couple of slides for the benefit of everyone as well. But I see a hand up before I've even started.
Yeah, hi. Graham, if you just have Graham's comment.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, are we talking about Berkshire West as it says in the agenda, or West Berkshire as it says in the slide?
Good question. It is Berkshire West. That's the west part of the county. So these roles are to be rolled out and being rolled out across the whole of the west side of the county.
I ask because, as I've said in the pre-meet, there's a big difference between West Berkshire, the local authority of which I am a member, and Berkshire West, the combination of 3 local authorities.
Absolutely. Thanks for that clarity. And that is indeed, this is indeed a west of Berkshire, half of the county. Is that okay, guys?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll proceed. So next slide, please.
Is it possible to put the slides up at full, on the slideshow? Just be easier to see, I think.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, the acronym is isn't the best actually. It's effectively standing for additional roles, and that's what these roles are. So this is a national program that's been picked up by PCNs across the country and it's being adopted here in Berkshire. And this is just a bit of effectively NHS England context. If we could go to the next slide, please. I'll get to the meat and potatoes of the business in just a moment. So the background, obviously, we know that mental health is a significant needs, extremely prevalent, obviously, high on the agenda. And this is the context of where the roles have come from, where the additional funding has come from, and why it's here. I'll ask you to move on again, Linda, until I get eventually to the meat and bones of it all. So this is the aim of the roles. You obviously can read those aims on your screen. In essence, I'll speak to the aim and then get on to what they're actually doing. As it currently stands, the ability for people to access mental health treatment, it's good if you're made aware, if you become aware of the excellent materials that are out there, the ability to self-refer into mental health services, but many people still regard their GP as the first port of call when it comes to their needs, of course, and some people still don't necessarily have the insight into their own mental health needs, and they'll come with physical presentations and very quickly identify that their problems are mental health problems. So the idea of these R's roles is that they are locally based, PCN based mental health professionals. They're band 7 professionals. That means they're either a mental health social worker, they'll be potentially a psychologist, or other professionally qualified mental health worker. So they're very experienced. They'll be based in the PCNs, and the GPs will be able to directly refer to them, or indeed they will even take the place of the GP initial appointment in a way that perhaps a practice nurse would do, with a view to looking at mental health problems and triaging them. That in essence is what they are. They are truly bringing mental health access to the PCNs locally with professionals. I'll take a question on that bit, and then I'll move into the meat and bones of what the guys are doing day to day, what it looks like. Sorry, who's the hand up? I can't see the name. Apologies.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say, for the benefit of everybody here, we're talking about primary care networks, which are groups of practices. They will have a medical director who is a GP with perhaps half a day a week to be a medical director of the PCN. So that's the setting. They're supposed to be geographically coherent, but often it depends more on who gets on with whom. Anyway, as it certainly is in Reading. Anyway, perhaps I could just ask my question, which is, does this cover children as well as adults?
Linda, I'm going to ask you to move on to slide 7, if that's all right. And for those of you that are curious as to why I'm hiding slides 5 and 6, they are slides that we had prepared for other context around the person who manages this team. I don't think it's really relevant for this presentation because it's more of an internal setup. This is the meat and potatoes that I was talking about. So if I may just outline what they do, and then this would be a good place to take questions because there isn't that much more in the presentation beyond. Professional based in a PCN, so in reality based in a GP surgery, potentially up to 3 different GP surgeries in the local PCN, typically 2 across the week, effectively holding clinics. These are initial assessment clinics, and the big advantage for GPs, the reason GPs, I'm not sure if we have any GPs present, but if I were to speak for a GP, my understanding is the reason the GPs are very keen on having these roles is because somebody can be booked in immediately for mental health triage on site on the day in some cases, and certainly planned bookings ahead of schedule, much in the same way that they might use their practice nurse. So the R's worker will do a true triage, so no longer than 20 minutes per client, which is very short in the context of the mental health world. They'll be assessing the client's risk and safety of kind of paramount importance, and then they'll be getting to the nub of what the initial need will be. And so often they'll be teasing out, and it's a very difficult job, of course, but they'll be trying to tease out the distinction between a mental health presentation that needs further assessment and access to mental health services beyond the triage versus potentially life crisis, third sector needs, social needs, etc. And that if they identify those as being the primary issue or issues that need addressing before any further mental health progression, then they'll rely on their colleagues, some of whom are already based in these PCNs, GPs themselves, like social prescribers or other workers who may be able to get access for that client for alternative needs. So one major plus point is in today's world, certainly in previous times, if you have anything approaching a mental health need, yet really some of your problems are about needing employment support or alternative third sector support, without this level of sophistication, most typically the GP will simply send the person in for a full mental health assessment, using up resource, potentially wasting the client's time, or even worse, having them approaching the gateway of accessing mental health treatment only to be turned away because they're not ready for mental health treatment. These are some of the biggest concerns, risk issues and complaints that they exist in the current mental health system. So these roles are designed specifically to avoid that, to divert that from happening. So I'm not aware of how long I've got, and I don't want to take up too much of your meeting time. Does anybody have any questions around the role of these professionals and what they're doing?
Tom.
Just one question is whether the funding is fully from national or whether it's partly from the practice, as it is with some of the other roles. And then question as to how you've gone about liaising and training with GPs and training them, because everything depends on GPs getting the referrals right, doesn't it? So I know there's many other services where this doesn't really work very well. So yeah, perhaps you could say a bit about that.
Yeah, relevant points. I see June's hand up. She might want to speak to it, or she might have another question of her own, June.
I was trying to do both, Matt. I had a question, but also I might be helpful on the funding. So to answer
Sure.
Tom's question for you is, I've frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, you're clear, June.
Is that the funding for the R's programme, Tom, is there's a 50-50 split in terms of the cost. We have 50% of the income flowing from the CCG to us, and the PCNs are allocated centrally money for the R's roles, which again covers the 50%. So for the mental health people, they are employed by Berkshire Healthcare. They are assigned to a particular PCN. Each PCN will have a contract with us, and they're supplied equipment from both us and the PCN, because we don't have that connectivity to work in multiple systems with one laptop currently. And we've got 8 in place at the moment, both east and west of the county. So the other point I was going to make, Matt, if I've answered Tom's question enough, Tom, for you, have I?
I think June, you've answered the first part of Tom's question. The second part was really really good and tricky thing that he's asked, which I'm happy to speak to. But was there anything else you wanted to say there,
Yeah,
June?
so I just was only going to say to colleagues, in case you run off, Matt, is that the R's programme, it will be a number of disciplines that will roll out over time, and this is focusing clearly on mental health. We're in conversations in some PCNs around having dietetic support, and we're looking at other things. The first people that were employed in R's was the paramedics. And we're looking at first contact physiotherapists. So this will be a programme of work that we do across all of the PCNs, across multiple disciplines in healthcare.
Far bigger than my role then. Thank you, June. That's helpful. That's really helpful context. Tom, before I do go, or anybody else needs to ask, shall I answer the second point you raised, Tom, which is about GPs? That's really tricky. My response on that is that I think you're absolutely right. I've got quite a good position in the role that I do to see those problems, and those problems are around GP education and you know, where and how to refer, or even identifying the mental health problems. I think the GPs see this as a really positive step to having somebody else screen those clients up front, to have an understanding of what the client's needs are from somebody who's got mental health training. So in many ways, these guys are replacing the initial GP appointment. So it's in terms of their positioning, and they're linking to their local GP leads, who they ostensibly report to day to day, even though that it's a 50-50 split, as Julian says, and there is a line management line going into mental health services, which is essential. Day to day, their colleagues are their GP professional colleagues and the other professionals in the surgery. So it's as good a bet as I think we'll ever get of them learning more and understanding more about mental health needs, far better than some of the mental health teams that I oversee, who sit in central services and very rarely speak to GPs. So it's a positive development on that front as well.
Okay, could we take Roz and then David Buckle, and then Julian. Roz?
Thanks. My question was around how is this being evaluated and where we are in the national rollout, and is there learning from places that are further ahead of us that's being fed into what's happening here, and how are we going to discover whether it actually works, it makes a difference? Is there potential for things to be modified if it doesn't seem to be working out as well as it was thought it would do? Those sort of things, really.
Okay, a lot of questions. All good ones. You've overwhelmed me with a number of questions. So on a very basic level, the system itself will be reviewed primarily via the PCNs, but also at the back end, if you want to call it that, if I call it that from a mental health perspective, looking at the number of cases who are referred through, who are accepted, that's tracked. So are the outcomes of the clients that enter treatment, they're also traceable, trackable. And then, of course, there's satisfaction that's measured at PCN level through the usual client satisfaction measures. There's nothing unique about, there's no special kind of mental health satisfaction measure that we put in place, for example. There were other questions, sorry, you were asking.
Well, it was really, where are we with regards to the national rollout? Has our model reflected the learning from others that are further ahead of us and that sort of thing, really?
June might know more about the national picture. I know from a mental health perspective, these roles are fresh and new, so we're in the early stage or the early phase rollouts, so in that sense, it's a new thing that's being trialled. We're in very early stages anyway, so we only have at the moment we have 3 of these IRS workers in position in the West, and actually it's probably worth noting it's proving very difficult to recruit to the roles, as might well have been anticipated. That's due to the dearth of mental health professionals in the marketplace who are available to do the work. So a short answer to that is it's very, very early days.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Thanks for those questions.
Okay. David Buckle.
I'm a retired GP, and my initial response is this sounds excellent, and I'm sure most practices would really welcome it. But in the past, when things have been rolled out, they can be patchy in general practice. So is there a national mandate or mechanism to make sure that every PCN engages?
I don't, June, again, June may know more. I don't think there is a mandate, but I do know, June, that the take up in the West has been really, really strong. Is it complete, June?
No, so I think you're right, David. So it's not a mandated requirement for GPs to engage, and some PCNs have not yet fully engaged. We are at the very early stage of the cycle, so I think across the patch we've got 7 or 8 in post, and we're looking for something close to almost 30. I think it's 15 and 15. I'll check the number afterwards. So we're at the very early stages. So any practice that engages and has a mental health practitioner in their practice can only be a good thing. I think the questions that have come up in terms of monitoring, effectiveness, it's really, really early stages. So I would say, from an assurance point of view, David, this has been well received by GPs. They are engaged. We're going through the process of recruitment and positioning people in practices, and then it's about embedding it and moving forward. But it isn't something they are required to do. But most practices would say it's the right thing to be doing. It's a good thing to have. So we're not meeting very much resistance, if that answers your question.
Okay, could I very briefly give you 2 things just to think about in the future? I don't want to, I want to say again how good I think this is and how useful it is. So the first thing is, when I commissioned general practice in Berkshire, there were always some practices who did not want to engage in something or other for some reason. So that causes a rather patchy situation. So just please keep your eye on that and find ways to engage practices, because the practices that don't engage are often the ones who aren't offering the best service, to be frank. And the second thing is, good things like this get overwhelmed quite quickly. So there is unmet need. When I had a busy day at the surgery, to be honest, just the faff of doing a load of paperwork might put me off a borderline referral, but it's so easy just to walk next door and see somebody you know and just say chat that over coffee. So I think those borderline referrals are the ones the GPs are holding. You know, there is a tendency for them to come your way when you offer a good service like this. So it could get overrun, and you just need we need mechanisms of getting people in and move them on.
Thanks so much. Julian.
Yeah, good morning, Matt. Thanks for the presentation and the update there. So just a couple of points and maybe a bit more of a question, which is, I think you're right about workforce. I think on the slide you didn't want to show us because it was more internal. You know, Band 7 mental health practitioners are like hen's teeth at the moment. So I wonder whether this is, if it's going to thrive and survive, we may have to sort of compromise a bit. And certainly that's a conversation I've had with the lead for the PCNs in Berkshire West, which is it, you know, are they going to get the good numbers anytime soon if we're holding out for sort of Band 7s, Band 6s? Will we have to think differently about the type of people who can do this role, which was a thought? Otherwise, it just may remain as a concept, which, you know, people understand as a sort of good one. The sort of second element is the landscape of mental health. I mean, I think there's some work for us to do internally, but we're also with primary care networks about what the landscape of mental health looks like. We've had a plethora of much needed investment in specialist teams over the years, you know, EIP, perinatal, all the rest of it, with different referral routes and criteria. And now in primary care, we've got the additional responsibility roles, but also we've heard from Susanna Yeoman in the East about the mixed roles, you know, the mental health integrated community transformation kind of roles, which do longer term care at primary care level as well. So it could get quite a complicated landscape in order for both GPs to understand specialists and also patients being referred into that. What's the interface? I mean, are we doing the mixed roles in the West as well? Do they exist?
Yeah, that's a question for me, isn't it, Julian?
Well, I think only you could answer that because I don't understand really the interrelationship between those two, and it looks like it could get messy.
Well, no, it could, but we won't allow it to. So it's a really good question. Timing is never great, is it? When roles come on stream. So these Rs roles have come on stream slightly early in comparison to the Mixed West rollout. There is a Mixed West rollout. And our plan is that these Rs workers work alongside those mixed workers in a true PCN offering. So essentially, one of these workers would be doing the screening. They'd be doing potentially a follow-up. I didn't explain that because there's obviously a lot to cover here, but they could do up to two meetings, so a follow-up with a client. And typically, Julian, they would look at potentially referring straight into that mixed service as a trusted colleague at PCN level, as you say, to do some of the work that might be required. And the space that the mixed teams are filling is a really important one, I think, given the services that I'm involved in within BHFT. And that's where clients aren't necessarily ready or able to benefit from SMI, so severe or complex mental health treatment programs, but where they need something to stabilize them and give them some psychological input from an experienced practitioner. So both the Rs roles partnering with the mixed service at PCN level are effectively bringing mental health down to PCN level and giving somebody something and something quality at that early stage. I think they're both positive developments, and you're right, there's obviously a risk of there being seriously disjointed work if those teams aren't intimately joined. I see them as reporting into the mixed service when the Mixed West service is launched, but of course it isn't launched yet. We're not there yet with the Mixed West service. Okay. They're involved in all of our discussions, and I'm speaking regularly to the people who are bringing that service on board.
Okay, so they're equivalent really of the primary care multidisciplinary team effectively then, aren't they? You'd see them as the MDT effectively, some doing assessments, some being able to refer on. So it's like it's all one team effectively then, isn't it, ultimately?
It most certainly is, but it's if I were to make a comparison to the existing system, it's quicker, shorter, sharper triaging and access to treatment than in the current system, where you're talking about long and repeated assessments often. That's where the biggest criticisms are, is that the assessments aren't joined up and they take too long, both to get to the assessment and to get through an assessment. So these would be truly local delivered services. Although I take the point from an earlier colleague that there's always a risk of services getting overwhelmed if they're good and if they look good. And that's one of the reasons why we were so keen to make sure that there's a linking line, a reporting line into the current existing mental workers in the PCN don't get isolated, so they don't get stuck and not being able to escalate clients for support where crises are emerging, that kind of thing.
A couple more questions, Matt. Then we'll probably brought to a close. But
sure.
John Barrett. John, are you there?
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Yeah. You've sort of semi-covered my main point, but do you know, Matthew, new services only continue to get funding if you can prove they work, and the only way you can prove they work is to. So I think, you know, that's a very important aspect to do. Good to see you're going to link into the mixed roles when they come on. Have we any time frame for those mixed roles in West Berks? That maybe, does anyone know that yet, or is that I appreciate that's not your department, but anyone able to in West Berkshire may come on stream?
If nobody else can speak to it, I can tell you they're recruiting to those roles as we speak. They've recruited some of those roles, but right. Nobody has. There are definitely no mixed roles on the ground.
No, sure. But no, I appreciate the East are at least a couple of years ahead on this, aren't they? Because it was some time ago I attended a thing about it.
It is quite a different picture in the East, but in the West, yeah, the roles have started to be recruited. They are having some of their own recruitment challenges, which do kind of echo the question.
Yeah, you're almost competing for the same people in some ways.
Yes, yes, there's a bit of an overlap. They're slightly different roles. It's far more psychology focused in mix. But right. Yes, there is overlap. You're right, and I believe they're having some difficulties, but they have successfully recruited a number of people, but they're definitely not ready to deploy yet. That's basically where they're at.
Well, that's excellent to hear the recruitment stuff. Thank you very much. Great.
No problem.
Okay, Tom, one last one, and then we'll move on.
Yes, just to say, firstly, I think the public will be baffled as to why this is an adults-only service, but then this mixed role is a complete novelty and surprise to me, and I wonder how does it work alongside CMHTs, and where are we with the CMHT review, actually, which seems to have been running, but of course we've had a pandemic and so on.
I'm afraid I can't speak to either of those questions, I'm afraid.
I can. So what was the first question, Tom? What was that? I remember. I know the second question about the CMHTs, but
I think the public would just be baffled that there isn't a similar service for children.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I mean, you agree. So the roles are obviously nationally mandated, set out. And I would agree with you that children's mental health services are massively underfunded and continue to be so. In terms of the review of mental health teams or CMHTs, I think for us it's going to be wider than that now, because when we started to look at the role and function of community mental health teams, these roles weren't even on the stocks, and now effectively the whole philosophy, the way they're described by Matt, is quite different. And therefore it will have an impact on everything else that goes after it. So we're going to have to review the way in which the architecture of specialist mental health services hangs together, because these services are, in a positive way, very disruptive, aren't they? You know, easy in, easy out. Mm-hmm. We may have to shift some resources from secondary care in order to go downstream and staff these posts, and that may have a positive impact on the demand in secondary care. So I think once these are up and running, one of the things the Trust will have to do is a bit of a strategic review about how it organises its services based on some of the impacts of these.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Thanks for all the questions. Matt, thanks very much for your presentation. I think we've got the gist of it, and it's very clear. I guess some of the challenges that have been come up in discussion about recruitment to staff to these roles, and I suppose as a layperson, thinking about the potential complexity of all these various things come together, and as Julian says, maybe there needs to be a sort of a review with all these things to help the structure, nice simple structure as everyone understands it, but a very positive enhancement, and thank you to you and your team for all you're doing, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you very much, guys.
We'll let you get on with your job.
Thanks very much. Take care.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Well, a very interesting presentation, I thought that. Right, can we move on then to Committee Steering Group reports, Living Life to the Full?
Yeah. Have on pages 25, 27 in your pack are the notes about the Living Life the Full meeting held on the 29th of January. We had a bit of a shunt round because we were due to have Berkshire Healthcare speakers. They've been shunted on to our April and July meetings. So at very short notice, Carly Newman, the Operations Relations Manager from Number 5 Young People in Reading, came to give us a talk. And thank you very much to both Tom Lake and Deborah Edwards for the contacts into that organisation to get this organised. I knew nothing about this before the meeting, neither did many of my colleagues, but it seems to be a very good scheme they've got running where they're engaging with lots of young people via secondary schools and getting them to become young ambassadors, as they call them, in a helping other people then to go on to be peer support people for other people that have mental health problems. As you can see, they operate from 11 to 25-year-olds in their thing, and in fact, I think Carly was a person that received help originally from the organisation and now actually works for them. So it proves it sort of works. They link into the National Citizen Service Trust, and that helps them the new citizenship program. They run the new citizenship program, and the charity run that, and lots of organisations helped reply into that. Lots of companies and stuff provide support for that. And if anyone's interested, Jenny's got a couple of PDFs to tell us more about how that scheme links in and who's supporting it in the mental health area. I made note of one particular question that happened during our meeting. Martin Ewicker asked about new governor recruitment and things. We always have troubles with new governors, and you know, how we potentially get some younger governors in, because there's lots of us fine old chaps take place as governors, but the difficulty of recruiting younger and possibly very young people into governor roles has proven quite difficult. So Carly came back with a number of ideas, and I know that Tom is going to take some of these on board in the membership communications side of things to try and see how we can build links into some of the areas that Carly's already in, to see how we can promote things there. The other point we went on to is we talked a bit about trusted information sources, especially over the past couple of years. There's been lots of misinformation, shall we say, on all sorts of health issues coming into the public domain, and so I've noted that the main one that I tend to use, and it's the Neighbourhood Alert community messaging scheme. This is run by an organisation on behalf of Neighbourhood Watch and all the police services throughout the country, and each area has got a local sort of police coordinator, and the Thames Valley person is based in Windsor Police Station, local police area, and they provide an excellent regular bulletin on all sorts of things, and lots of health organisations, charities, councils link into this to promote what's going on with their work. And we were talking in the pre-meeting about a lot of new governors being needed, and I wondered, Tom, I didn't mention this during the pre-meeting, whether that's a potential source of promoting the governor role, because it goes to an awful lot of people, and I know we're looking for quite a few governors coming up soon, so there's potential there. So very good meeting, arranged at short notice, very interesting topic, and lots of food for thought. Happy to take any questions, or if not, just move on, Martin.
John, thank you very much. Are there any questions, or shall we move on? Okay, let's do the membership and public engagement. Tom, is this you? You're on mute. Oh. Tom, do you have trouble? Let's move on. Let's move on to the quality.
I just got
report.
there.
Oh,
Just got there. Sorry, I was
okay.
having
Sorry.
trouble. My cursor control has gone mad. Right. Okay. So we've had some really interesting sessions on social media, and we learned that there's a new social media officer in the comms department of the trust, and obviously recruitment and communication with the staff is a big part of their job, but they're doing wider communication as well. So that's been really interesting. The most used medium is Facebook, where there have been some thought about how to put out the messages that the trust wants to put out, and the idea is to put them out at different times of day to space out about perhaps up to 4 messages a day. So this trust now has 30,000 followers in various roles, so you can see this would be a great place to invite people to nominate themselves for governors as well. So that's been really interesting, and it's been running for about a year and built up to this 30,000 level. So membership seems to be all right, but we do need to concentrate on young adults and even younger people as well. And then there's this difficulty about having imbalances between the local authorities. Now we've got elections coming up, and this is nominations open on the 1st of April and close on the 20th. So we've got a period coming up in which we can encourage people to stand as governors. We have elections with 3 vacancies in Windsor and Maidenhead, 1 in Slough, 2 in Wokingham, and 1 in West Berks, and then there's a clinical staff vacancy. So definitely in Wokingham and West and Windsor and Maidenhead, we've really got to put some effort in and see that we get a good slate of candidates. That would be really excellent. So if we've got those candidates, so anyone who knows somebody or can put out the word, that would be very helpful. And I'm sure Julie's got links. There'll be stuff on the website, and there are helpful documents as well. So Julie will have all of that. And lastly, to say that I invite people to think about the AGM as well. This is a good time to think about it, because there's time to do something about it if you think it wants changing, or you'd like a particular topic brought up or something like that. So again, just if you have thoughts, do pass them on to Julie. And lastly, Brian Wilson has agreed to take over the chair. I've just got I thought it was only 1 year, but it turns out I think to be 2 years to go as governor. So I think it's very good that somebody else should now. I've been doing this for a bit, so good for somebody else to be taking over, and I shall be giving Brian my help and support, and I hope you will all support him too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any questions? No? Shall we move on to the quality report? I don't know who's going to speak to this.
Hi, Martin. I'll speak to this because
Thanks.
Andrew Horn, who's the chair of the group, was the chair of the group, has ceased to be a governor. He's recently resigned because of other things in his personal life. I'll let the report stand, and if there's any questions, I'll answer those questions. But I'd just like to make the point that the quality account, which the trust produces every year, goes out with a list of governor questions at the back and some comments from the lead governor, which sort of consolidates these questions. So that will be going out to governors after this meeting for them to, I think there's be 2 weeks where they can send comments back to me, and I'll consolidate those comments and forward them to the team that produced the report. For the last year or the last couple of years, it was brought to council meeting, but this year, on Andrew's advice, we took it back to the quality group, because that gives a little bit more time to for the team to answer governor questions. So the last meeting, there was about half an hour or 40 minutes assigned to talking through the quality account from the point of view of the people that compile it. And so that took place at the last meeting. So that will be sent out either by me or Julie, and I'll ask for responses back, any comments, any questions back within the next 2 weeks. Finally, I'd like to say that we do need a new chair for this group. I have been a chair for 2 or 3 years in the distant past, and I put my hand up as temporary chair, but I see that I will be in my little tent on the side of the Scottish mountain when the next meeting takes place, so I won't be able to execute that role. So far I've had no volunteers, so I'm sort of asking you, everyone here, of course Ned's can't apply I'm afraid, but everyone here, including Martin, to put your hand up and agree to chair the next meeting and take on this role if you feel able to. It doesn't require any special technical information. You just need to attend the meeting and ideally follow an agenda which is prepared for you by Jenny or whoever is providing admin support to the meeting. That's all. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks so much, Paul. If it's okay, we'll move on to item 7, which is executive reports from the trust. Heidi Aylesby, are you here, Heidi? I think.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think just bring out the key points because we've read the report.
Yeah, so happy to take any questions or take any questions away.
As I read it, Heidi, it's sort of not much change. Is that right?
Yeah, not much change. I mean, the only progress we've made is obviously with I Want Great Care. That's now being rolled out, and it's a bit slower than we expected, but that's due to technology as well for the delivery of some of the technology. But yeah, it's starting to go well, and we are starting to get the feedback.
Okay, so any questions on the report for Heidi? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Heidi. What we'll do now is to go on to Julian performance report, which you have a copy of, item 7.2.
Thanks, Martin. Just let's just take the performance report as read and invite any questions.
Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. All right. We're obviously answered them all already. And then the annual plan on a page, which is, I guess, for reference. So you can see the plan for the trust for this coming year.
Yeah, Martin, there's quite a lot of feedback and it's a bit noisy. If everybody could go on mute other than you, it would help. I think people are off mute at the moment, I think.
Okay.
It's quite echoey. Yeah.
That seems better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Tom, you've got a question. You're on mute again.
I just wanted to point out that on the finance page, capital, I think the labels between actual and target are reversed. That's what I noticed anyway.
What page of the pack, just for the reference?
Oh, now you'll ask me to get rid of my cursor. So.
Okay, don't worry. I'm sure Julie will have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think that was the main thing. I think.
Page 68. Okay, for Julie. Thank you very much. John Barrett.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the plan on the page, I think it's very, very good and clear. The updating of the first section of plan on the page to talk about providing harm-free care. Very well worded, very well done. And Julian's report is lovely and large, and we can read it all as well. Fantastic, good progress all around.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jenny, no doubt.
Yeah, don't thank me. What I would say is that what happens with the plan on a page is if you're in a physiotherapy department doing outpatients, your impact on patient harm is really radically different to if you work on an older person's mental health ward. So what happens now is each division and each team will actually start to put measurable, smart objectives against the things that are relevant to them. So not everything in this plan on a page would be so relevant. So there are some services where harm is a rarity. and they would be focusing much more on good patient experience. So, for example, what Heidi was talking about, the I Want Great Care metrics, will become obviously hugely important for them. And so on their own plan on a page, they would use this as a template. Sure. They would put specific measurable targets in. When we try and do that at a global level, it just confuses the heck out of people, because actually quite a lot of it is not relevant, or services are in such different places that actually asking them to reduce harm by 20% when they're already, have done it by 50% the previous year doesn't make much sense. But just to let you know that there is a build, at each team level. So in the next few months, you should see teams and divisions with their equivalent to the plan on a page, following this process, but with very clear metrics that sort of follow behind it. But thanks, and I agree with you, the harm-free care thing is very specific about the main causes of harm in the organisation and what we want to do.
Yeah, it seemed to be a particularly good update to that plan, Julian, I thought, and there's lots and lots of reference to working as teams and stuff, which is obviously essential, but actually put it there on the front page, I think is excellent work. Thank you very much.
Tom?
Okay, just wanted to draw attention to the band at the bottom, which is almost possible to ignore as if it were a decorative strip, but we're talking about partnership and working in particular on health inequalities. So I just think it's worth noting that. That's very welcome, of course. And of course, it is health and care partners, but local authorities, there are many other services that contribute, as we know. And so we'll just have to see how we view that, all developing really, what our role is in understanding what's happening and so on. But thanks very much. Anyway, that's very good to see that there.
Thank you, Tom. This is, of course, part of the overall strategy of the ICSs, so it's not new. Ros.
Thank you. Thanks, Julian, for the update about the plan on a page. That's good to hear that each particular team or service has their own specific version. I wondered, will those be accessible and available to the public so that if a patient visits a department, it will be displayed for people to see? Will it be on the Trust website so that people have an understanding of what each team is trying to achieve?
You're on mute. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, it went on again by itself. It does that. Yes, teams are expected to display their plans on a page. So when you go around, you should be able to see those. That is the expectation. We don't put them on the website with 196 teams. Again, it just becomes a bit impenetrable for the public to sort of wade through that. So you'd probably display it visually in buildings and services. This one obviously is on the web page, but not every single teams would be. It'd be too much, and it'd take ages to find it. But at a team level, at a department level, a mental health team or a CAMS team or district nursing team, they would have their plan, yes, publicly.
And can I just ask a quick supplementary? So have patients or the public or service users, carers, whoever, been involved in the development of those plans?
Yeah, inextricably. So the source of data and information and everything else that informs this has come from sort of patients and staff, for example. So the staff making it a great place to work is entirely related to our staff survey, feedback from staff, etc., and prioritising those areas where there are sort of greatest concern. In terms of harm-free care, that's the evidence of where avoidable harm happens in the trust to patients on the most frequent basis. So you're able to triangulate with all the feedback mechanisms you get either in complaints or in terms of the reporting of serious untoward incidents that form that parcel. And then if you think about the improving outcomes, our entire way of designing I Want Great Care not only involve patients but also governors in terms of the design of that program. Health Watch, patients, and everything else design that new program about how we get the best patient experience, outcomes and measures. So At a high level, all of these things you can draw upon and see how patients or carers were involved, or how it triangulates to that, other than section 2, which is predominantly about staff. And then again, you can see the same sort of strand. You'll be able to evidence about where that priority came from.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jenny. Right, it's time, I think, to move on to
John's got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
John, yeah.
The feature of local authority reports is that there's 2 or 3 standard questions which the compiling officer has to address. Graham might be able to actually name them, and I'm wondering whether, and I totally agree with Julian, that, for instance, there are some areas of service where harm is not a particularly strong issue, but if those questions could be addressed, then we could be sure that at least somebody had given consideration to them. I don't know if, Graham, you can add to actually name some of the areas on standard council reports.
Not off the top of my head. I mean, it's difficult because, of course, you know, there is, to some extent, there isn't no standardisation amongst council reports. They are individual to the thing being reported upon. So I think, as I say, not off the top of my head, but happy to take it away if someone wants to drop me a line, and I can raise it with officers.
Well, perhaps... John, could you just explain the purpose behind the question? Just because clearly it's isn't ringing a bell at the moment. Just to help us understand.
As Julian said, there are over 124 teams, so to actually put the considerations of those 124 teams on is going to be absolutely overwhelming. But if we could be assured that those fundamental questions, which may be very relevant for some areas but less relevant for others, have at least been thought about, and there's a short statement. Councillor Edwards, because I know this happens with the Reading Borough Council reports, she might be able to identify some of them. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll go back to some of the local authority reports and identify those common questions which are always addressed. It's what is the impact of on type of question. Does that help?
I think probably. I mean, some of this is, of course, the way the trust reports all these harms and things through the normal reporting process up to the board. I'm slightly personally, I genuinely may understand, but I think the question you have is about how do we know it's making a difference? Is that the essence of the question?
How do we know that modifying, tailoring the report to the particular service area is a true reflection of the risks which are prevalent in that area?
I think Julian.
A good question. So do we get alignment with services between the evidence base about what's going on? So, for example, an area that might have a high level of harm, are we assured that they're working on those elements of the annual plan, as opposed to something else which is less relevant to them, which could happen? You get misalignment. I get that. So
exactly.
Yeah. So we have a process called objectives dialogue now, whereby directors and senior leaders walk through the organisation and have a conversation about what will start to appear on their page. And the starting point for that has been obviously not an off-the-cuff conversation, but it starts to look at the key metrics and data. So Martin, for example, talks about the board seeing a helicopter view of where we are with key harms. And obviously that it can be broken down to individual service level or even individual practitioner level. And we use that data to have a conversation so that we can see the services which are the top contributors to harm. So, for example, let's take falls in the organisation. So there are actually about 8 or 9 units which contribute the greatest amount of falls in the organisation. We know what they are, so that when we have a conversation with those services, we're able to see what it is they're doing, what target it is, and what work they're doing. So we're able to sort of walk through from the helicopter view about how many falls happen at a corporate level, right through to what the top contributors are. And we use quality improvement metrics to do that. We use visual management to do that. So if a unit was a top contributor to falls, through the process of cascading the annual plan and the conversation with that unit, it would be highly unusual for that service not only to be setting a target, but actually actively working on that. So there's a line of sight from ward to board about the top level metrics.
Okay, I think because of time, John, maybe we, if you want to discuss it further, we could take it up outside the meeting. But I'm particularly conscious that we have Alison Durrans here to talk about quality improvement, as Julian's mentioned. So I was going to, if possible, invite Alison, if you're here, to take us through and welcome your new role. I think, Alison, I think slightly on the shorter side than the longer side, just because we're running a little bit late, but please take the time you need.
Thank you, Martin, and good morning all. I know a few faces around the room, so thank you very much for joining and asking me to come and just do an update on our quality improvement programme, which has been running in Berkshire Healthcare since 2017, which I'm sure you're aware of. I've put together quite a comprehensive set of slides, but I don't intend to go through them all. But I was aware that some of you may be familiar with quality improvement and the methodology that we follow within Berkshire Healthcare, and some of you may not. So I'm not intending to go through it all, but just a few slides. So next slide, please, Linda. Next slide, if possible. Thank you. So just a bit of an update and a little bit about the QI team. So there are 9 of us that work full-time in the QI team across Berkshire Healthcare. We've had quite a bit of staff turnover in the last year, but we are now fully recruited to all of our posts. And interestingly, we have recruited 2 team members who've come from a business or a commercial background into the QI team to add a new objectivity and to challenge, I guess, our ways of working, because quality improvement is used in many other areas, obviously not just in health. There are 4 main branches of the work that we undertake within the QI team. We undertake quality management improvement training, or as we call it, QMIS, both with our divisional leaders, with our frontline staff, and with our corporate teams. Sorry, I forgot the word corporate off there. We work with the exec, and a little bit about what Julian was just talking a little bit about, the strategy deployment, about how QI will run with this golden thread all the way through from our clinical teams or our corporate teams all the way through the board, up to the board, and how we're working in an improvement way. We manage projects in a quality improvement, complex and large projects across the organisation. And we also train our colleagues and think about capability. So how are we going to keep this going? You know, when the training is finished, how are we going to keep this going so it stays within Berkshire Healthcare? I can see I've got John's hand up already. I don't know whether you want to come in here, John, now, or it's appropriate now, or wait till the end. I'm up to you.
Yes. Hi, Alison. Yeah, long time no see. Yeah, just really a quick comment. Fantastic to see that you've got some people from outside health coming into it. I was heavily involved from a QI point of view at Gillett's Hill, and yeah, I think it's a lot to be learnt, and hopefully it'll move forward. I didn't know you were in this role, as many other governors probably didn't, so I'm sure you'll make a roaring success of it.
Thank you. I've been in the role since September. Yeah, if people may be aware of me, maybe not. I was at Prospect Park as the divisional director for 5 years prior to coming into this role, which is about transformation and quality improvement. So, so thank you. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Alison.
Next slide. I think we might jump a few slides. Oh no, I might just say this a little bit, just about where we are. Sorry, go back one, if we may. Just a little bit, you might be interested about where we are in our training. And obviously we've been going since 2017 within the organisation, but COVID got in our way a little bit. We had about 18 months of not doing any training, obviously because we had COVID to focus on, and a lot of the team were redeployed into other roles at that time. So at the moment, we've got 53% of our clinical and 38% of our corporate teams are trained in QMIS, this quality management improvement system. And last week, we just rolled out wave 15 of training. So you can see how much training we've done. And at the moment, we're working with 5 teams in the Mental Health West division. Wave 16 is planned for August because training isn't just one day. It's a focused, intensive training about the tools to use and the way to change things. And then we coach and support the team to implement those over a few months before we sort of say, OK, over to you now. So we've got wave 16 planned for August, where we'll complete Mental Health West division. And we are going to look at, again, rolling out to 1 or 2 corporate teams, because they're trained quite differently. Same tools, but obviously when they haven't got clinical metrics and clinical things to work against, it's a slightly different way of working. We also undertake what we call bespoke training. So if we have teams that are slightly different for whatever reason, and the 2 we're working with at the moment are Place of Safety in Prospect Park and Community Justice and Liaison, which obviously covers a huge area, including Hampshire. We do bespoke training on a one coach, on a one-to-one basis to help change the training a little bit to meet their needs. So we also do bespoke training. And I've said the roadmap of training will continue for at least the next 2 years because we've had this delay due to COVID. Ros, I can see you've got your hand in the air.
Thanks, Alison. It was just a quick query. I just wondered, with regards to the content of the training,
yes,
does that include service user stroke carer involvement in quality improvement work? Because I'm sure a lot of the work is focused on using data from feedback surveys, etc. But that's not necessarily the same as having somebody alongside staff working on quality improvement. So just a query about that.
Yeah, yes, thanks, Ros. We don't at the moment, but it's something we're really focusing on. We had a really good session with South London and Maudsley. They came over to Prospect Park about a month or so ago. Julian and some of the exec team were there, and they talked quite passionately about how they've managed to work with and train up service users in quality improvement. So when we were doing our plan on a page, let's link with what Julian was just saying, we were doing our quality improvement plan on a page last week. We really had a long conversation about how we can do more of this working with our, our users, our carers, our families, a lot more. So it's something we're going to try and focus on this year. Although saying that, once we have some of the tools embedded into the teams, then service users really do get involved a lot, especially where there is stationary places, I suppose. So looking at some of the wards, for example, Prospect Park, some of the mental health wards, the huddle boards, the improvement tickets, the improvement ideas, anybody can contribute to those. And I've been in areas where we've had service users on a mental health ward, we've had the domestics and the cleaners and the medics and the nurses and the therapists and the families and the carers all standing around a huddle board producing tickets for improvement ideas. So we see it happening on the ground, but we are really going to consider how we think about training up some of our users, our patients and our service users and our families to think about QI and add that dimension to our training, because we recognise it's missing at the moment.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
Julian.
Yeah, I was just going to add the distinction between having service users who are QI trained, which we haven't got, versus the engagement of patients in the process. And you covered some of that off, but our biggest area was actually the redesign of the emotional unstable personality disorder pathway, which was completely co-designed. It was a proper 2-year co-design with patients, so patients actually drove that redesign of that entire pathway, guided by quality improvement principles. So we used QI in order to guide it, but actually the people doing the guiding and the driving of it were the patient groups. So it lends itself heavily to effectively massive patient engagement. What we haven't got, and it'll be interesting to see whether the process improves by having effectively patient and carer QI practitioners or people trained up is the next step, which is slightly different to engagement involvement. It's a different level of involvement, I think. That's something we'll look at.
Yeah.
Alison, just John, is it another point?
A thought just went into my head. How about considering QI training for governors for the future?
Well, I think
we'll get John.
just a thought.
I think
we'd be delighted, John.
If you're at time, could we just let Alison finish and then save up any questions? Otherwise, it loses the flow.
Yeah, thank you,
Alison.
Can we just skip to slide 8, please? Just keep going. There you go. Next one. So one of the things that happened within the organisation when we started to think about projects, so we've talked a little bit about training, but one of the things we also do is begin to think about the projects that we do within the organisation. And we started to think about a project prioritisation board, how we can, as an organisation, know what we're doing, try and not overburden our staff, not overburden our divisions, and think a little bit about what are the most important things that we do. And this was draft 1. And if we just go to the next slide, I'll just show you how that has changed and matured, especially during COVID time, to what our virtual project prioritisation board now looks like. Some of you may be familiar with this, you may be not, but it follows what we call a standard work. It used to be a huddle board for us that we used to stand up and all stand around. Obviously now we do it virtually, but this enables and this is a QI methodology, showing how it can be used in more of a corporate, more of a an executive and high level way, showing the projects, showing what's happening, showing what's transforming to business as usual. But it also gives an opportunity for us to think about and have a conversation in the organisation about some of the projects that we're going to pause, that we're going to have to make wait, because we haven't got the capacity to do that at the moment. So you can see how it's matured over the years from something that we used to stand up around with bits of paper and magnets and how it was all going to work to something that now is much more visual, but actually works virtually across our services. If you could go down to slide 12, that would be helpful. There you go, a little bit about what we've learned. So this is a really long program to implement. Obviously, it's a new way of problem solving. We're developing our own problem solvers because one of the great underlying things about QI is that we train our staff to become the problem solvers. But we have a multitude of complex teams. We talked about the 120 and 140 teams across our organisation. So it's not easy to change the way people are working. Quality improvement, as some of you may know, is no quick fix. It's a process which takes time, energy and passion to support our teams to change their behaviour and do things slightly differently. We've had fantastic support from our executive team, and that's really crucial. If we haven't got leadership support, we know that things are not embedded. So again, that's from each team, a leader, a ward manager, a service manager. If we don't have that leadership support of changing things, then things very readily turn back to how they used to be. We're beginning to embed and look at this thing we've called strategy deployment, to think a little bit about how that's working from the ward to the board, and this golden thread of information all the way through. However, maintaining a stable QI team has been a real challenge. Obviously, people don't come into the job able to do it, and QMIS is specific to Berkshire Healthcare. So people may come in with quality improvement understanding, but the way we deliver it within Berkshire Healthcare is slightly different. So we've been constantly training new staff, and obviously we've had the delay of COVID. So that hasn't helped. But the way that we've moved from being very much face-to-face in our training, in our huddle boards, in the teams that we use, to doing it virtually has been really seen nationally and internationally as groundbreaking and an exciting development. And we work hand in glove with a company called Catalysis, and they've been really impressed about how we have taken that forward and developed during the COVID pandemic. So there's been new things that we've learned, but it hasn't been an easy place. Can we go to the next slide, please? We've had some real successes. We run these rapid improvement events where a group of staff have come together to tackle really challenging, long-standing issues. Last year, I was involved in bringing together nearly 50 staff from Prospect Park to begin to think a little bit about the racial abuse experienced by our staff. And that was 4 days of bringing the team together, following a clear methodology and coming out with countermeasures to trial at the end, and having people together away from their day-to-day work, following a process, being listened to, and then coming up with the idea, then becoming the problem solvers has been really helpful. And it's really good to see some of the work already beginning to happen at Prospect Park about tackling racial abuse towards our staff. But equally, we've done that with falls, as Julian was mentioned. It's one of our big things, one of our breakthrough objectives we work on, working with our community teams and the mental health wards to think a little bit about how they can re-look at their countermeasures, re-look at their root causes to see if they can change and reduce the amount of falls they have. So we run rapid improvement events. Obviously, we've had some real focus over the last couple of years from on reducing prone restraint at Prospect Park, where we were a major national outlier. And that's been sustained, which is great. And obviously there's been some fantastic work, which I'm sure you're aware of as well, about increasing the amount of uptake for physical health checks for people with serious mental ill health. Both of those were driven by Berkshire Healthcare staff who are Greenbelt trained in QI, and that's really helped drive those and sustain those. Talked a little bit about virtual QMIS, Quality Management Improvement System. A real success, time-saving success, and actually we can train more teams in that way. And it's cheaper because we're not hiring at hotels for many days at a time. And the excitement continues. So we've just, as I say, rolled out Wave 15, and those teams who have started Wave 15 are really excited to do that again. And we have a waiting list. We have many emails over the month saying, when's my team doing it? When can my team do it? People still want to do this, which is great. And develop a more lean way of working. And so that's fantastic. That's still happening. And just go to the next slide, please. I thought, oh no, hang on. I think you've got half a slide. If you go to the next slide. Yes, let me share. Can you stop sharing the screen? I don't know, for some reason, you've only got half a slide there. If you stop sharing and I share mine, it's a better slide. Is that being shared?
Yep.
Fabulous. Okay, so this, sorry, you only had half a slide. I've just got a fuller slide now. So I thought it would be just useful just to show some of the improvement outcomes over the last few months, really, that might be more specific and might give you an idea of what we're doing. So we worked, one of our bespoke teams was the psychology team at Prospect Park, and we ran a bespoke training session and coaching session for them. And they've started to engage really well in looking at how they can help reduce the bed days for people within Prospect Park with an EUPD diagnosis. So they've changed their internal processes and are much more lean and much more focused in helping Prospect Park deliver on that metric to reduce the length of stay for people with an EUPD diagnosis. As Julian has said, the EUPD Pathways project was a major project over a couple of years. that the QI team help lead in collaboration with service users and families and all of our teams or our mental health teams. And again, we're beginning to see some input and some change in the length of stay for occupied bed days at Prospect Park as well. So QI is no quick fix, it takes time, but actually we are continuing with that project. We continue to give it support and we're beginning to see a shorter length of stay in Prospect Park for those patients. We've worked with the ADHD team to support some thinking and some process design and support about having a one-stop shop for young people and their families. So when they come for their assessment, they also get their medication and treatment at the same time. It used to be people going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, and actually working with the team to thinking a bit about how they can make this a much better experience for our young people and getting quick treatment, which has reduced the complaints into that service hugely. We've worked with the children in care team. They had a very high DNA do not attend rate for physical health checks. It was consistently above 25%, and they completed some work. They're quite a small team with our support to think about implementing 4 countermeasures, 4 actions over a 4-month period, and that DNA rate has been reduced and sustained to between 0 and 4% over the last few months. So again, they've done really well in implementing what would seem as a small change. It was a complex change to understand, but a sustained change as well. Talked a little bit about the physical health checks, and that's been a huge improvement within the organisation. So we can see that actually a community mental health team like West Berks has 100% rate at the moment, and other teams are working on how they can increase that, but it's gone from 60 to 80% just about across all of our teams. But there's work carrying on, and the Greenbelt is really still working on that at the moment with them. We're doing a lot of focus about getting our own staff through what we call yellow and Greenbelt training. We train them. We're an accredited organisation to train. We're linked with Cardiff University. We're one of the only health trusts to be accredited. There's 3 of us in the whole of the UK, so we can actually train and accredit our own staff, which is part of this how we maintain our sustainability going forward. But a lot of our staff who had been trained had not completed their accreditation. They have to complete a small project and be assessed by us to pass that. So there were 49 people outstanding who hadn't trained. So at the moment, we're really focusing on getting those 49 people accredited through their yellow belt this year, which is double what we would normally have. And then they become the resource within the divisions for taking forward the training and the small projects of improvement within the organisations. We regularly post on Twitter. We've now got over 500 followers on Twitter. And interestingly, when Slam came over to see us at Prospect Park a few weeks ago, a couple of them were saying how they follow us on Twitter. So we also think about how we can communicate what we're doing and get the messages out to people. Just the last 2, and then I'll be quiet and take any questions. A place of safety, we talked about them being a bespoke team going through training, but we can already see they've had a 20% increase in the uptake of supervision for their staff. So it might be a small thing that the team works on, like increasing supervision uptake for their staff, but having a 20% increase is a huge increase when you've only got a small amount of team. So much better increase and recognition from what we use, which is called a status exchange, where every day the team manager or the person who's acting as the team manager has that conversation to say who's having supervision today, when are we having supervision, how can we plan it into the day, and begin to build that within their normal processes of working. And then I guess just thinking a little bit about our breakthrough objectives, we've talked a little bit about falls and how those metrics need to be flexible and dynamic. So we've actually just increased the metric to 26 over the whole of the organisation per month. But that's to give a much more of a realistic metric to our teams and trusts. So each team will have a slightly different number to contribute to that 26 or less per month. And some teams have gone up, and we've accepted that they've gone from 3 to 4 months, 3 to 4 falls per month, where other teams have reduced in that. And I suppose it was just interesting to show that we have that flexibility and that dynamic metric review, as Julian mentioned, through this thing called objective dialogue. So there's lots going on within quality improvement. I will stop sharing and take any questions.
Many thanks, Alison. John.
Yeah, hi. You said you have this waiting list, Alison. I mean, how do you manage and prioritise that? And is it teams referring themselves, or are you approaching teams in as that you would like to be in it? How does it all work?
No, we have a plan, John. Unfortunately,
I thought you'd asked. Yes,
we have a plan, and what we've focused on is trying to get through all the teams within a division, because then the division is all working in one way. You understand quality improvement, and at the moment, unfortunately, we have 2 or 3 different ways of working, which causes some confusion in a division. So we're really focusing on getting divisions complete in that way of working, because that just helps manage how people are working so much easier. So we have a plan for the next 4 years.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Alison.
John Wellham.
Thank you, Alison. The 3 key words. The first one is complete. The second one is consistent, and the third is continuity. It sounds as though you're actually, through the QMIS system, able to deliver across those 3 words.
Yes, we would hope so. We have some flex within that, and obviously some teams working slightly differently, but that is our goal. Yes, certainly.
Okay. You happy, John?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Alison, thank you very much for the presentation, and I think it's really important, this methodical way of handling quality improvement in the trust. And as you say, it doesn't always happen instantly, but it's this embedding of this continuous improvement culture and delivering real output improvements for our clients. So thank you very much for that. I think as time's pressing, we must move on, but thank you again. You're
very welcome. Thanks very much.
We've got governor feedback session, but unless anyone's got anything particularly want to raise, I was going to go to AOB. Is that okay? So any other business? I think, Tom, you've got an item you wanted to raise.
Yes, thank you. This is, I mean, perhaps it should have been governor feedback. This relates, relates to a particular case that I ran across, but of course the issues are not about the case, but about the what it reveals about processes and so on. And it's partly about the children's mental health services and part in the trust, well, it's partly about some of our governor process in the trust, and partly about wider issues with governor children's services. So it's a child, I won't go, I ran across it a couple of years ago, and then recently again. The child has, after about 2.5 years, I think, had an ADS type diagnosis. And what worried me a lot is that they didn't have any treatment for anxiety during the long wait, although they're very anxious. And I specifically, with this case in mind, I asked about this in council, and Minu assured me that treatment for anxiety was independent of being on the waiting list. But what seems to have happened is that some primary care worker in some service in schools examined this and dismissed the anxiety symptoms as symptoms of the as yet undiagnosed condition of autism. So, I mean, I think on top of that, their report has since got lost, so that isn't terribly helpful. And to me, this whole indicates a really poorly integrated and poor standard service. But the second point, which relates particularly to the trust, is that the child is now on a waiting list, apparently of 12 months, expected to be 12 months for treatment for anxiety. As the child was put on the list, it's quite hard to get on the list, I understand, and this was by exhibiting suicidal intent in some way. I mean, whether it was simply demonstrative, you know. But so the problem here is that when we look at waiting list statistics, which we get a very nice waiting list report, which is great at a QA meeting, we see time to first appointment, which is about 3 weeks, but it's not giving us a picture of the fact that you can then wait 12 months for treatment. So I've written to Minu about this, and he's looking into the service sort of in detail. But I just wanted to raise this here because what's important is to make sure that very important that we get this, great that we get these waiting list reports, and I think they're to some extent the same that you and the NEDs, look at the board, but it's important that they give a fair picture. And so I'm just asking really whether we're getting a fair picture and how we can make sure that we do. And I appreciate that very much Julian's remark, this is a really underfunded service, and obviously that's not something that we can deal with here, and we've got to take it elsewhere. But I'm just raising that to make sure that we can develop these waiting list stats so that we can see what really matters to the patient experience across the pathway, rather than just, first appointment, which indeed might be a quick risk assessment and so on. Thank you very much.
Julian, did you want to comment?
Well, no, I mean, Tom is right, although we have taken at least twice, Martin, David's been here to give us a very detailed CAMS update where actually the nature of those weights have been exposed. So just to reiterate, if any emergency today with a child or young person, we're able to see them usually on the day or the next day, and we're pretty good at that. So those who are most severely at risk get a very quick service. But then we've talked about ASD, ADHD many times. And the waiting list was well over 2 years. This year we received additional funding, yet to be confirmed whether it will be recurrent or not, from both East and West Commissioners, with a view to reducing that. And despite the fact that we've had increased referral loads, the waiting list is coming down. So some of those longer waiters have been cleared. And again, at some point we can bring an update in terms of that. And then Tom is right. Sometimes, the presentation of the child will change. And some services, there are quite lengthy waits too. ASD and ADHD are by far the longest waits. They dominate it. It's somewhere between 4 months to 9 months for anxiety and depression at the moment on the CAMS waiting list. And again, we have reported that, and we are seeing an increase in referral numbers as well. So I think when we do our sort of brief, high level look at waiting lists, sometimes those things can get masked, but certainly with CAMS, which have our longest waiting list, we've certainly brought 2 bespoke reports to governors that have really got under the skin of that previously. And so what Tom is really referencing is highlighting that very same issue that we've highlighted, which is there are long waits, differential waits for different sort of conditions. But we have made some inroads in that ASD, ADH, but it's still an unacceptable wait. And it's not the focus of the elective recovery that the NHS is currently focusing on, which is around cancer, orthopaedic waits, all those types of things, waits over 2 years. There isn't national money or national fund targeting the CAMS waits at the moment, which is my point really, which is, although it causes lots of people angst, somehow it never gets chosen as the priority service.
Okay.
Can I just ask if you've got any comment on the fact that this wait for anxiety only started after the ADS diagnosis? I mean, I may not be processes that are part within the trust, but I wonder how that could have happened really.
Well, sometimes people will get referred to but 2 pathways are waiting for an assessment of ASD and ADHD, which is a particular process to go through, and they may also wait for anxiety because that's what the assessment and the triage requires. Conditions for children may change over a period of years, so it may not have been appropriate for them to have been referred to anxiety at that point, but without knowing the case, I don't know. So it could be entirely sensible that wasn't the case, because you wouldn't refer a child who didn't meet the criteria a year ago for anxiety, but their situation may have changed. So without not knowing the case, it sounds like Minu is onto it. So it may be a poor process, but it may actually be the correct assessment at the time, bearing in mind that a year is a long time and things can change. So difficult to comment without the specifics, Tom, but it does sound like you have engaged the medical director, Minu, in terms of looking a bit further, which is probably the the best route.
Thank you. And since Rajiv is here, I will just say that I intend to write to him and see whether we can work on making our waiting list reports reflect more of the pathway. You know, I think other governors would appreciate that as well. We're very pleased to get them, but having a 3-week wait indicated for CAMS anxiety and depression is not really representative of the pathway.
I think
3 weeks to first appointment.
Yeah, I think, Tom, that, maybe we can have a clarification of this outside. Otherwise,
sure.
You know, because we need to understand the whole picture. But certainly getting the right reports are important to know how we're doing. I just got one. Any other business? I've just got one. Anybody else? Okay, well, the one I've got is to, I think we'd all want to record our thanks to Jenny Cheng and Andrew Horn for their sterling service to the governors. Very valuable contributions they've made, and I understand why they feel it's now time to step down. So thank you to both of them, and wish them both, I know we'll wish them both every happiness in the future. So thank you indeed to both of those. The date of next meeting of the Joint Council of Governors and Trust Board is the 4th of May, and the formal council meeting on the 15th of June. So